The streets of New York City were coated in rain that night, the kind that painted reflections of neon lights across the pavement. Inside, the Willow Café, a small diner tucked between glass towers, Elena Rivera, 27, adjusted her faded apron and tied her dark hair into a bun. It was almost midnight, her third double shift that week. The smell of burnt coffee and grease clung to her uniform. Her feet ached, her hands were rough, and her heart felt heavier than the trays she carried. But Elena didn't complain. She never did. She had come to New York 5 years earlier with dreams of becoming a writer. Instead, life had handed her bills, eviction notices, and an aging mother back in Puerto Rico who needed her help. Every paycheck went to medication, rent, and survival. Dreams didn't fit in that budget. That night, Carmen, her best friend and co-worker, nudged her gently. "Hey, your blind date's coming, remember?" Elena sighed. "You really think this is a good idea? You deserve one night where someone looks at you like you matter," Carmen said. So after her shift, Elena traded her uniform for a simple navy blue dress and a borrowed coat. The restaurant chosen for the date was the Lenox, an upscale rooftop bistro overlooking the city skyline. It wasn't her world, but for once, she wanted to step into it. When she arrived, her reflection in the mirrored elevator doors made her heart flutter. She looked nice, not glamorous, not perfect, but like someone trying. At table 7 sat her supposed date, Nathan Pierce, whom she had met through a dating app. A finance executive, charming in his messages, promising in tone, except he wasn't there. Minutes passed, then half an hour, then a message lit her phone. "Sorry, something came up. You seem sweet, but I'm looking for someone more put together. Take care." Eleanor sat frozen, heart twisting. The words "more put together" echoed like a cruel joke. She wanted to disappear, but the waiter's pitying glance made her stay seated, pretending she was still waiting. The restaurant buzzed with chatter, diamond bracelets flashing, laughter echoing, everything feeling too bright, too far from her. What she didn't know was that across the room, Daniel Hartman, 41, CEO of Hartman Development Group, had been sitting alone. He wasn't supposed to be there either. His business meeting had cancelled, and he'd decided to have dinner alone, a habit that had become too familiar. He was the kind of man who could buy anything except peace of mind. But then, as he looked up from his tablet, he noticed her, a young woman sitting by herself, trying not to cry. At first, he thought she was waiting for someone, but when the minutes passed and she didn't move, he saw the pain in her stillness, the way she stared at her untouched glass of water, her knuckles white around her phone. And for reasons he couldn't explain, it hit him harder than any deal gone wrong ever had. Before he could stop himself, Daniel stood and walked over. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Is this seat taken?" Elena blinked in confusion. I think you have the wrong table," he smiled softly. "Maybe, but it looks like you could use some company." She hesitated, then nodded. "If you want awkward silence, you're in the right place." Daniel chuckled. "Perfect. I've had plenty of practice." Something in his warmth, kind but not pitying, disarmed her. They talked about nothing and everything, about bad coffee and worse bosses, about New York's cruel beauty. For the first time in years, Elena felt seen. By dessert, laughter had replaced tension. "Tell me something," Daniel said. "Why does someone with eyes like that sound so sad when she talks about her life?" She smiled faintly. "Because life doesn't care about your eyes, Mr. Hartman," he said, offering his hand. "Daniel Hartman." Her breath caught. The name sounded familiar, until she realized why. The Hartman building, the massive glass tower across from her café, bore that same name. "You own that?" she asked. He shrugged. "Technically, but the truth is, most days it feels like it owns me." She studied him for a moment. You don't sound like a rich man, he smiled. Maybe that's because money stopped feeling rich a long time ago. As the evening ended, Daniel insisted on walking her to the subway. Thank you, Elena said quietly. You didn't have to. I know, he said, but maybe I needed to. The next morning, Elena returned to the Willow Café, expecting everything to feel ordinary again. But at 9 a.m., a familiar face walked in, tailored suit, rain-damp hair, soft smile. Daniel. She froze. You're not seriously craving your pancakes? Absolutely, he interrupted. Best breakfast in the city, I've decided. Her co-workers whispered, wide-eyed. A billionaire in a tiny diner wasn't a common sight. For weeks, he came back, always the same order, always the same seat by the window, and always a reason to talk to her. At first, she thought it was kindness, then coincidence. Then she stopped pretending it was either. One afternoon, after closing, Daniel waited for her outside. You know, he said, I spend my life surrounded by people who only talk to me because of my name. You're the only person who's ever asked about me like I was just me. She smiled softly. That's because you are. He hesitated. Can I take you somewhere tomorrow? Not a date, just a day away from the noise. The next day, he drove her to Cold Spring, a quiet town north of the city. They walked by the river, shared coffee, and talked about everything they'd both lost, chasing what didn't matter. He confessed how his marriage had ended because he couldn't stop working. She told him how her father had died without her being able to afford the flight home. Two strangers who had no reason to meet, finding in each other the calm they'd both been missing. Weeks turned into months. Their connection deepened, quiet and steady. Elena's world began to bloom again. She started writing again at night, small stories about the people she met at the café. Daniel, inspired by her simplicity, began spending time at the community center she volunteered in, anonymously funding repairs and literacy programs. But their worlds were still miles apart, and when the truth came out, it hit like a storm. One evening, tabloids exploded with photos of them leaving the Willow Café together. Billionaire's Waitress romance, screamed the headlines. The media tore her apart. Some called her a gold digger, others a liar. Elena's boss asked her to take a break because of the publicity. Her landlord raised the rent after realizing who she was seeing. Daniel's board called an emergency meeting. His PR team begged him to manage the optics. And his mother, the formidable socialite Elena Hartman, paid Elena a visit. You don't belong in his world, she said coldly. Walk away before you destroy him. Elena stood silent for a moment, then replied softly, Maybe it's your world that's broken, not mine. That night, Elena went to Daniel's penthouse, ready to end it. I can't be the reason you lose everything, she said. He looked at her with something raw in his eyes. Elena, everything I've built means nothing if I lose you. You remind me who I am, who I used to be before all this. She shook her head, tears streaming. They'll ruin you. He stepped closer. Then let them. Maybe it's time I stop letting the world tell me who I am supposed to be. The next morning, Daniel held a press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but his voice remained steady. My name is Daniel Hartman, and I'm in love with Elena Rivera. She isn't my scandal. She's my truth. And if you think love has a price tag, you've forgotten what love actually means. He resigned from his company the same day. Months later, Elena opened a small bookstore cafe in Brooklyn called The Second Story. Daniel helped renovate it with his own hands, covered in paint and laughter. Locals loved it, not for the fame, but for the warmth. He taught part-time business classes at the local college. She hosted open mic nights for struggling artists. Their lives became smaller, simpler, but infinitely fuller. One evening, as they closed the shop together, Daniel handed her a small box. Inside was a silver locket engraved with a single phrase, "For the woman who taught me to stop counting hours and start living them." Elena smiled through tears. "You know," she whispered, "I used to think love was something that happened to other people." Daniel kissed her forehead. "And now?" "Now," she said softly, "I think it's something you build, one quiet moment at a time." The rain began to fall again, tapping softly on the cafe windows. Outside, the city kept rushing, chasing, hurrying. But inside, time had finally slowed down, because two people who were never supposed to meet had found exactly what they both needed. And as the lights dimmed and the last clock ticked past midnight, Elena Rivera and Daniel Hartman finally understood what the world never had. That real love doesn't rescue you from your life. It teaches you how to truly live it.